The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome everyone to today's Tribal Food Innovations webinar with our featured innovator, Choctaw Fresh Produce. Innovation is occurring in food systems work all across Indian country, from programs that use food as medicine, to programs that focus on youth development as a way to preserve food and cultural traditions for the next generation, to programs that use a creative approach to market access and seek to improve tribal economic development through food and agriculture. Programs that exemplify these themes and more in Indian country food systems innovation can be found in Intertribal Food Systems, a report commissioned by the W.K. Kellogg Foundation and produced by the Indigenous Food and Agriculture Initiative. This webinar will explore a market access theme featuring John Hendrix from Choctaw Fresh Produce, a tribally owned enterprise of the Mississippi Band of Choctaw Indians that is improving the tribal community in a self-sustaining way through sales of fresh organic produce direct to stores, restaurants, community farmers markets, and more throughout central Mississippi. If you look at the handout section of your control panel, you'll find the slideshow being presented today. I invite you to visit the W.K. Kellogg Foundation Community Food website at communityfood.wkkf.org, where you'll find more information about Choctaw Fresh Produce and the many other food innovators in Indian country featured in the Intertribal Food Systems report. All attendees will be muted during the presentation. Today's presenters, John Hendrix and Aaron Parker, will take questions at the end of the presentation. Attendees can submit a question by using the questions feature of the control panel. I'd like to introduce today's presenters, John Hendrix, the Director of Economic Development for the Mississippi Choctaws and General Manager of Choctaw Fresh Produce, and Aaron Parker, Research Director and Staff Attorney at the Indigenous Food and Agriculture Initiative. John is the Director of Economic Development for the Mississippi Choctaws, focused on creating new sources of business revenue for the tribal government and new job opportunities for tribal members. He has more than 20 years of experience in tribal economic development, representing more than $500 million worth of investments. John also runs two of the tribe's companies by serving as general manager of its 800,000 square foot commercial real estate portfolio, as well as general manager of Choctaw Fresh Produce, a certified organic fresh produce farm. John received his BBA from Millsaps College and his MBA from Duke University. Aaron is the research director of the Indigenous Food and Agriculture Initiative at the University of Arkansas School of Law, where she supports the initiative through program development, research and writing, and analysis of legislative and regulatory issues affecting tribal governments, businesses, and individual producers. She helped author the W.K. Kellogg Foundation's Intertribal Food Systems report, which features nearly 100 innovative food systems programs doing work across Indian country. Before her work with the initiative, she was a staff attorney and research coordinator for the Cabell Commission, a national working group convened by the Secretary of the Interior to repair the federal government's Indian Land Trust Management System. She earned a JD and LLM in agricultural and food law from the University of Arkansas. Aaron, you're up to bat.
All right. Thank you, Brian. Well, good afternoon, and thank you everyone for joining us. As Brian mentioned, in today's webinar, we're going to be exploring themes in Indian country food systems innovation from our report, Intertribal Food Systems, which was commissioned in 2015 by the W.K. Kellogg Foundation. In addition to that report, they have recently launched a brand new website where you can explore the contents of that report and the many great tribal programs and businesses like Choctaw Fresh Produce that are highlighted there. I'm going to circle back around to that report and new website at the end of our webinar, but right now I want to turn everything over to John, our guest speaker and Economic Development Director for the Mississippi Band of Choctaw Indians. John, it's all yours.
All right. Well, thank you, Aaron and Brian, and good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you today. I certainly appreciate the invitation to share our story with the audience related to Choctaw Fresh Produce and the efforts at Mississippi Choctaw to rebuild our local food system in pursuit of food sovereignty. So let's see if I can advance the slide. Just a little bit to put this in context, Mississippi Choctaw received recognition in 1945. We have almost 11,000 members on 35,000 acres of trust land in 8 separate communities throughout East Central Mississippi. We have a democratically elected government with a tribal chief and 17 elected councilmen. And my focus really is on, as the economic development director, is on the business side. So Choctaw is has a good reputation for economic development in our area, and they actually opened their first company in 1969. And today we have about 15 different business divisions, 11 of them are non-gaming. So a fairly diverse portfolio of companies and operations from manufacturing and healthcare, real estate development, and today our focus is on organic vegetables. So I'm going to share that story. All told, we have about 5,000 employees serving a broad customer base from over the years, including McDonald's and Pepsi and NASA, John Deere, and then Whole Foods is one of our customers for Choctaw Fresh. So that's a pretty well-rounded group of customers to support our businesses. So the focus of today's presentation is really to tell the story about how we got into Choctaw Fresh Produce, why we did it, and how we went about getting started. So it really starts back in the summer of 2010, and we have a couple of casinos, and the food and beverage director contacted me to say that we're shipping in produce from all over the continent. Surely we could start growing some of that in our environment closer to home and maybe put some more people to work. So that was where the first seed got planted, so to speak. If you have not been to our community, the Pearl River Resort is fairly large. We have 2 casinos, about 1,200 hotel rooms, 8 restaurants, 2 golf courses, and a water park. And in addition to that, we have another location with a 3rd casino. So the Pearl River Resort food service system spends millions of dollars each year on food, and we were going to tap into part of that to supply some fresh produce. We started out with a basic market survey just from the casino, and this was, keep in mind, about 7 years ago. So we started with a list of just getting what produce items that they purchase and what quantities and what types of packaging. And then we went through that list and tried to identify the types of products that we could grow here in our climate and our community. And we tallied that up to about just over $250,000 per year in purchases of items that we felt like we could supply from our climate. The reality of that is, for any of you that are thinking about getting into this, is that farming is very seasonal. So we can, in practical terms, only supply a small percentage of that $261,000 in demand because of the seasonality for the items that we're able to supply. So that's just a footnote that any of you doing this similar approach may want to keep in mind. The second part of our research was trying to find out if the community had an interest in this. So we at the time, we were updating our 5-year plan, and as I mentioned, we have 8 separate communities. So we went out into each community back in 2011 and to find out what their interests were and what their desires were for their community. And in all 8 communities, what at that time was called community greenhouses were ranked among the top 5 projects in all 8 communities. So there seemed to be kind of a community level support for getting back into the local food system and finding a way to start producing more food and more fresh produce in each of our tribal communities. So to sum it up, I guess when we first got into it, we felt like the benefits were cross-cutting. So it supports the tribe's motto of self-determination. We wanted to create some jobs in particularly the outlying communities. So of our 8 communities, several of them are more remote and rural. So, and they're a little harder to find job opportunities in those areas. So we thought that Choctaw Fresh could be a part of that job creation. Health is a situation that we're dealing with here at Choctaw. So we've got over 20% of the community is diabetic, and we wanted to start making improvements to that situation. We have a high percentage of our students that are on free or reduced meals, and we wanted to increase their awareness of local foods and nutrition and healthy eating. This project started with our casino food and beverage folks looking for a competitive advantage for their menu, being able to supply farm to fork items and some niche items to increase their appeal to their customers. And we had some tribal assets that were not being used, which I'll get into in a minute. So we saw kind of a cross sector of benefits that we felt like it would be worth moving forward with the Choctaw Fresh Produce concept. So the way that we got it started was through an A&A SEDS grant. And most of you are probably familiar with this. It's highly competitive, but if you're able to secure funding, it is a 3-year grant program from the Administration for Native Americans, and it helped us purchase our equipment, pay for our staff, pay for our supplies. Not in total, there's a match required, but it definitely got us further down the road to get our assets in place and kind of our team together to get this venture started. So we submitted that application in January of 2012, and we were approved for funding in September of 2012. So our mission today at Choctaw Fresh Produce is committed to building the internal capacity to grow and supply organic fresh produce to the community using best-in-class food safety practices in a financially self-sustaining way. And there's a few key terms that I wanted to highlight there. So one is building the internal capacity. So when we got into this, we realized that the local food system had just about dried up at Choctaw. So there was not a lot of people in the community that knew the fresh produce, kind of the commercial scale fresh produce growing standards. So we've had a focused effort to train 6 tribal members, which we call local food ambassadors, to rebuild the skill set for the organic farming expertise among tribal members. Fresh produce, so the choice there is that we're not doing processed foods, we're not doing frozen foods. So right now we're purely supplying whole fresh produce to our customers. Food safety has become very important. We are pursuing GAP certification now. We hope to have that the first week in December. So we want to make sure that we're providing safe food to our community and our customers, and be a financially self-sustaining operation. So we have actually set this up as a tribal enterprise. So this is a for-profit venture. And we did that intentionally to kind of give the operation some incentive to grow quickly and to cover its costs. So that was the way that we structured our program. So just a little bit about the organic side of farming. So the production is a little bit different on the organics. So with organic, you have to control everything from seed to harvest. So we had to put in our own greenhouse operation. So we grow our own transplants. We use primarily high tunnels, which is a more controlled growing environment. It is passive, but it does allow us a little bit of control over the temperature with the plants, and it allows us to control the watering through drip irrigation. And then soil is one of the most critical components of organic production because you don't use synthetic material, so you have to have a good, healthy, rich soil in order to be able to grow quality plants. So we put a lot of resources and effort into just rebuilding the soils and making sure we have good soil health. In terms of the different ways that we grow on plastic with drip irrigation on the ground. Everything we grow is in the soil. And then the next photo at the top right is growing tomatoes in cages. The bottom left photo is growing, I believe those are cucumber vines. So we put them on what I call yo-yos. So it's a string that stretches 8 feet high, and so the vine actually grows vertically. And so we plant the plants more dense, and they grow vertically, so we can get more production per square foot in our high tunnels. And then this is the first season that we've started experimenting with raised beds. So we had one farm location that had very poor soils, and we just were not able to overcome that. So we installed raised beds for the first time, raised beds with drip irrigation, and we're seeing some really good results out of that. In terms of our yield, it was not easy to start. Growing organically is a challenge, and it took us a while to get here, but we have definitely seen a huge improvement in our production volume. So that, and I give a lot of credit to our farm crew for taking the time to figure this out. But we are able to produce really high quality items for our customers and our community, especially using the organic methods. These are just some more photos to show the yields that we've been able to produce. So the picture on the left is just it's called a tomato berry plant, similar to a cherry tomato, but much better. The center photo that's actually the harvest off of one tomato plant in one day. So they were able to get about 25 different tomatoes off of one plant, and then the photo on the right just shows you the quality that they're able to produce. So again, the organic production is different. It's a little more challenging, but our crew has been able to figure out the methods that work best here. In our climate, and probably most climates, on-site cooling is critical for fresh produce. We have a very hot temperature in the summertime, and when you harvest your crops, you have to immediately, for most of them, get them cooled. So we have to have on-site cooling to make that possible, and that can be very expensive. So we found a product called a CoolBot, where you can actually take a window unit air conditioner and essentially turbocharge it for a few $100s that will allow us we built just an air-conditioned storage, a insulated storage shed. We put in a window unit and a CoolBot, and we're able to keep that temperature in the 34-degree range as needed, even during the heat of the summer. So that's been the most cost-effective way that we found to have the ability to cool off our produce out in the field. I mentioned earlier that we wanted to put to use some underutilized assets. So this was a photograph of a barn property that we had that had not been used in more than a decade, and we were able to improve that. So we have repainted it. We've put in some more cooler space, our storage areas, storage rooms, and to become our packing house. So we have probably another 15 years of life out of this barn that was just about to fall apart. So we were able to put that back into production. As we got into this, in 2013, we went out and did a community food assessment. We were just trying to gauge the community attitude towards this program, so and the overall health. So we found that 65% of our community respondents said that the health of the tribe was fair or poor. On the scale of 1 to 10, will more organic produce help the health of the tribe? The average score was 8.6. And then we got kind of a little market survey. So over the past 30 days, how much did your household spend? So we got a sense of how much money was being spent on fresh produce off reservation in the non-tribal communities. So this was just another good way for us to, as we were implementing our program, to see if we were on the right track and if there was still continued community support for us, and we felt that there was. So it was worth continue to expand our fresh produce operations. One of our missions is to improve access, so we do that in a lot of different ways. We have a very remote area in 8 different communities, so we needed to find ways to get our produce out to each of the communities. So we have initiated a mobile market program to make fresh produce available. We've also, if we have excess transplants at the end of the planting season, we make those available to our community to allow them to plant more for their backyard gardens. And then we have recently started a kind of a pop-up seasonal market where we can go to where our employees are and make fresh produce available to them. So just kind of the hyper convenience factor. And I'm going to get into more detail on each of these in a minute. But one of our missions is definitely to improve access in our community. Another related to the job creation, we have several different workforce training initiatives, and we have partnered with all of them. So we have a 90-day training program that allows tribal members up to 90 days for on-the-job training and a kind of a tryout phase to see if they enjoy that type of work and if they're a good fit for the employer. We've worked with them closely. We have a day labor program for people who may not be looking for a full-time job, but certainly in fresh produce, there's a lot of seasonal peaks during the harvest season. So we've had good partnerships with our day labor program to kind of fill the need for some extra work during the peak season, and that also fills that employment-based need for just part-time work. And then we have a youth opportunity program where in the summertime, kids age 18 to 24 are allowed to go work for tribal enterprises or tribal departments. And the photo on the right is just a high school student who worked with us last summer. So we've had lots of different outreach initiatives with our workforce programs and found good partnerships with them. In terms of startup funding, we started out with the A&A SEDS grant, as I mentioned, and then since then we've built lots of relationships with funding sources to expand our program and expand our impact. So we've pursued funding from First Nations Development Institute, and they actually helped us fund the mobile market and some nutrition education programs. Kellogg Foundation, who I believe is a sponsor for this webinar series, but we have gotten to know them, and they've helped us with some funding in partnership with NCAT for our local food ambassador program. So they're helping helping us to train our tribal members on organic vegetable production in the local food system. We have also received funding from the USDA NIFA CFP grant and the Value Added Producer grant. So we continue to pursue grant funding to expand our programs and initiatives and impact. Currently, we have 5 different farming sites. So we have built out kind of the main farm, and then we have 4 satellite farms that are trying to get more food production into each of our communities. We have in total 19 high tunnels that are 30 feet wide by 96 feet long, which covers about 1.3 acres. And then we have another 1.2 acres of open field site growing outside of the high tunnels. We have 3 water wells, tractor with all the implements, packing house, greenhouse, mobile market. We currently have 5 full-time employees, and we have 4 support staff from other tribal departments. In terms of the human resource needs for a fresh produce operation, it's a longer list than I realized when we first got into it. So you definitely need the horticulture and agronomy. You need the farm crew supervisor that actually manages the crew on a day-to-day basis. A big part of fresh produce is actually the harvesting, washing, and packing. So that's a process in and of itself that needs to be staffed by experienced workers. If you have any kind of mechanization on your farm that's heavy equipment that needs to be a skilled operator and somebody to maintain it, we have a lot of outreach in our community. So we do student tours and educational tours, but all of those take somebody's time. So we've had to build that into our HR system. We have food safety is again, very important part of what we have to do for fresh produce. So we have a food safety coordinator. And then we found out within the last year or so that the EPA, even if you're organic, has requirements for worker protection standards. So we've had to retrain our crew and get them certified as a licensed spray applicator for food safety and for worker protection standards. So that is a requirement that was new to us, but I share that with you in case you're maybe facing the same situation. That's all on farm. There's also a lot of things off the farm that have to happen. So the bookkeeping is a role that is very important to keep up with your expenses and your revenues and making sure you're collecting your bills. Marketing, if you're doing any kind of commercial work or even retail sales, you really need somebody supporting that marketing effort. Sales is really different than marketing. Sales, the marketing is kind of the I think of as the graphics and the brochures and the website and the social media. The sales is actually the person that's out there knocking on doors and opening up new customer bases and making sure that the customers are happy. So those are two different skill sets that are important for a larger scale regional produce business. Business management, so just somebody with the ability to kind of make good choices on the business side and strategy. If you do any kind of retail sales operation, somebody needs to be able to effectively manage that point of sale system. If you're doing commercial deliveries, as we are, we needed a delivery person with a driver's license and all of those things. And then there is a lot of record keeping and clerical work. So beyond the bookkeeping, if you do organic, there's a lot of record keeping required for that. If you have food safety requirements like GAP, which we're doing, you have to, that's a whole different set of record keeping. And then your EPA worker protection standards, all of those require documentation and record keeping. So the record keeping is something that doesn't come naturally to a lot of people, but it's definitely something that you'll need to have on your to-do list if you pursue something similar. So this is kind of our organizational chart. So we have actually created a public-private partnership, and it was not intended that way to begin, but that's the way that has been most practical for our community. So we have, in my role as economic developer, our office manager and our bookkeeper provide support for the farming operations. Our technical advisors, which we still lean on if we have technical expertise that we need for, say, soil health improvement or organic practices or food safety GAP certification, we still rely on outside advisors through the Mississippi State or through subject matter experts that we call in on an as-needed basis to help us. The farm crew is in the bright green there in the middle. So we have Daphne Snow as our farm manager, and then we've got 4 local food ambassadors on board, and we've got 2 more in training. So right now a full-time staff of 5, hoping to be at 7 here soon. We outsource our marketing support. We partner with the Tribal Natural Resource Department. They already had a farmers market program, so we just supply them with our items and they manage their on-site farmers market. And then we also have a real estate enterprise that has a maintenance coordinator, and that person provides some support for our machinery and our high tunnel maintenance. So it truly is a public-private partnership in our situation. As I mentioned earlier, our local food system, especially for fresh produce, had dried up when we got back into this. So we have put a lot of time and energy back into staff training. So the organic production, which is not common in our area, we've put a lot of effort into training our staff for organic production. Soils management, which is critical to organic growing. High tunnel production, again, that was new to our area, so we didn't have any in-house experts or even close by subject matter experts to call on to fill that role. So we had to do a lot of training and bringing in people to help with that. The EPA pesticide regulations and food safety. So we have built into all of our employees a development plan where we are committed to making sure that they're getting the skills and upgrading the capacity to perform their duties. We had some technical difficulties, but this is just an example of how we do some of our training. So I mentioned that we have 5 farms, and so one of the challenges is if an employee is at one farm and the person with the expertise is at another farm, it's just a challenge to show them what they need to do. So we have started recording just kind of real quick how-to videos, which they're probably a minute at the most, and we just upload them to a Dropbox. But all of the repetitive routine activities that we do, we're trying to just record a how-to video so that if the farm manager needs somebody to perform a certain task, once she has it recorded one time, she can just text them a link to that video and they can see exactly what it is that they need to do visually. So we've started this process, and I think it's going to be very helpful long term. The second or another highlight of our program is really the community education and outreach initiative. So we have formed lots of partnerships within the tribal community. So we attend the health fair, and work with our diabetes program. We have other partnerships with our natural resource and sustainability initiatives. So we have a Choctaw Youth Conservation Camp every summer, and so we give tours of our farm to those students and other youth initiatives. We actively every season give student tours. So this was one that took place last week. So our farm manager is on site. We let the kids walk through the high tunnels, get a sense of what it takes to be an organic vegetable farmer. We let them take samples, and then we partnered with our food distribution program for Indian reservations, the FDIPR Commodity Food Program. They have a nutritionist on staff, so we got that program to come out and actually give samples and recipes for the different produce items that we were growing. So just to encourage the kids to eat it, to eat healthy, and to talk about the nutritional aspect. So this has been a good program that we build into each of our seasons to partner with our tribal schools. For these tours, it's typically 5th and 6th graders. There's another program at the high school level with, I believe, juniors and seniors. So they have the Careers in Ag Profession program. So we partner with them and give their students tours as well. Again, we have on YouTube, we have a channel that what we realized was that people do not cook at home as much anymore, and they certainly don't cook whole fresh produce much anymore. So we just saw the need to actually do some demonstration how-to videos and put them on YouTube and share through our Facebook accounts. So we got about 15 recipes from our community, and we did how-to videos in partnership with the First Nations Development Institute grant to actually just in just a minute or two to show the ingredients, to show the process, and to show the nutrition for each of these recipes. So that's been a good way for us to expand our reach and to promote the health and nutrition aspects to our organic vegetable side. In terms of the sales outlets, we have retail outlets on reservations. So we have the farmers market that I mentioned is run by our natural resource program. We have the mobile market, which I've shown photos of to get our produce into the communities. We also have other programs, which I'll talk about more in a second, but Custom Harvest and the kiosk program. On the wholesale and institutional side, we sell, again, on reservation and off reservation to our casinos, to our health center, to our schools. Off reservation, we supply Whole Foods Market in Jackson, the Rainbow Grocery Co-op, Food Hub that's in Jackson, and then we do off reservation schools as well. And we have a community-supported agriculture initiative. So that is essentially a subscription in our harvest. So you can buy a subscription in a mixed vegetable program, and then every week during the harvest season, you'll get a share of 8 to 10 different vegetables. So just kind of knowing where your food comes from and supporting the local farm. So we've tried lots of different ways to expand our reach. We also donate to the elderly center. So we built into our weekly routine, if there's excess produce on a Friday afternoon that's going to go spoil, we'll take it to the elderly center to allow the elders to have access to it so it doesn't go to waste. So that's a good outreach program, and it keeps us from having any of our foods that spoil. Again, the mobile market just allows us to take our produce out to the tribal communities, or take our produce to a higher traffic area if we have an event in the region that we wanted to highlight our fresh produce and make it available. We can use the mobile market for that. The Custom Harvest program, which I mentioned a moment ago, the way we'll deal with this is if we have items that are ready to be harvested let's say on a Wednesday, we will send out an email blast to our employees that says, here's what we have, and this is just a sample flyer. Here's the items that we have, here's how much it would cost. Call or email your order in by this time. On Thursday, we'll harvest it, and on Friday, they can come pick it up and pay for it. So that's just what we call the custom harvest, and it's another way that we've tried to get our food into the community. We did this last year, and we're going to repeat it again next week. So the school gets out on the Tuesday before Thanksgiving. So we have partnered with our high school and the CAPS students that I showed earlier, and they actually help us run the Thanksgiving farmers market. So we use the mobile market, we park it in front of the school, and the students help us hand out flyers. We do promotions, and they help us get everything set up. So we want to make our fresh produce available to the community, especially around the holidays. So this is a program that worked great last year, and we're going to repeat it again next week. Another way that we've gotten food into the community is the end of the season. If we're transitioning from one crop to the next because of the season change, we need to clean those tunnels out, whatever is left. So we actually open that up to the community and allow them to come get what they want at no cost, so they can come stock up their freezers and based on how much produce that they need. So that's been a great way. It's a kind of a win-win. So we get our tunnels cleaned out and ready for the next crop, and then they're able to harvest what they want, and especially on the food preservation and kind of stocking up for that. So it's a great way to get more produce into particularly low-income households that may not be able to buy the organic fresh produce. The way that we've partnered with our diabetes program is through our subscriptions. So the CSA, Community Supported Ag Subscription Program, our diabetes prevention group actually buys subscriptions. So they bought 25 subscriptions for a 5-week period. And so we deliver those 25 cases each week over a 5-week period to their program, and then they're able to distribute that out among their client base. So that's another partnership model that's worked for them to increase access to fresh, nutritious food and to give us another outlet for our fresh produce. And this is the Fresh Produce Kiosk Program, which we also call a pop-up market, but we had some extra items last summer, and we said, well, let's just go put up a table in our casino at the employee entrance and see if there's any interest in what we've got. And it was a huge success. So we actually turned it into an honor box system. So we just had a price list. Every day we would go check it and restock it. And the employees were just able to come in, grab a bag, pay for their item in an honor box system. And it was just a great system for us. It allowed us to get a lot more produce into the community. It was just hyper convenient for our employees. So we want to expand that program in the coming seasons. So in terms of what we have remaining to do this year, we are updating our website. So next week we should go live with the ChoctawFreshProduce.com. So we wanted to revamp that, and hopefully that will happen here in the next week. We do want to achieve GAP certification. So we have completed all of our paperwork, all of our processes. We've done mock audits, mock recalls to make sure that our systems are working, and we have requested the audit to happen in the next few weeks. So we're hoping that we think that will be successful when they do the audit. So we want to be GAP food safety certified. We're planning to expand our farm to school program. So we have at Choctaw 6 elementary schools, 2 middle schools, and a high school, and we are expanding the amount of products and the different schools that we're supplying. And we've also got off-reservation schools that have asked us to supply them as well. So we're expanding our farm to school outreach and planning to apply for farm to school grant funding here in the next, I think that's due December the 8th. So we want to build on our farm to school initiatives. We're going to expand the fresh produce kiosk program. So we had started out with that at 2 locations. We're going to go to a 3rd location. And then something that I didn't realize when we got into this, but this is fresh produce, organic fresh produce farming is really very process oriented. So it's very labor intensive, and there's just a lot of little details that need to be done correctly to be efficient. So we've actually started approaching it kind of like an industrial engineer in terms of processes and training and checklists, and especially around food safety and harvest logs. So we've built out, or we're building out kind of a standard procedure for most of the things that we do, and we've seen a lot of improvement in just kind of our efficiency and our employees being able to learn new skills and kind of take a more formal industrial approach to it. So that's something that we're going to continue to pursue. The last thing I wanted to highlight was we just did an exercise about 6 months ago where we just, out of curiosity, said, well, what would it actually take to feed Mississippi Choctaw? Just from the ultimate food sovereignty initiative would be to feed your own community. So this was just the findings that we have a retired ag professor here in the community that pulled this together. So just kind of based on standard numbers for our region, but he looked at kind of the most common crops, how many pounds per capita are eaten on average in the United States. Kind of the closest yields we could find for us were in Florida. He took our population and then calculated how many acres would we need of production for those items to actually feed the community. So we just found this kind of interesting in terms of both the vegetable production and the protein side from livestock. So that was kind of eye-opening to us, and kind of the highlights were that for 11,000 members, we'd need a little over 3 acres of carrots, just under an acre of cucumbers, a little over 9 acres of tomatoes, 24 acres of potatoes, and then livestock would be about 1,000 beef cows a year, 4,000 hogs, and over 200,000 chickens. So a lot of chicken being eaten in our community. So anyway, that was just an interesting exercise that we went through that I thought might be insightful for some of you kind of planning your processes. So that's it. So I just wanted to hit the highlights of Choctaw Fresh Produce, tell you from our perspective kind of why we got into this, how we got into it, share some of the lessons learned and what we're doing and why we're doing it. And I think at the end, we're going to open it up to a few questions, or this is my contact information, so feel free to call or email anytime, and be happy to share anything that you'd like to know about Choctaw Fresh Produce. So with that, thank you to Brian and Aaron for getting this together, and I look forward to interacting with you all as you need to. Thank you.
All right, thank you, John. That was a great presentation. You guys have a dynamic operation there, and I'm sure that our audience may have a few questions for you. I would certainly encourage anyone that has a question for John to take advantage of this opportunity. He's clearly a wealth of knowledge. I will remind you that if you would like to ask a question, if you look in your control panel, you'll see a questions box. You can just type a question into that box, and any questions that I receive, I will just read them out loud and give our panelists a chance to respond to them. So go ahead and do that now. I've got a question that has come in. The question is, what is the best process for other reservations to duplicate your good work?
Duplicate my good work. So I'm trying to think of a good succinct answer. I will say that I guess the one thing that we realized when we got into it is that this was a lot more difficult than we realized. So growing organic vegetables, fresh organic produce for your community and making that financially self-sustaining is a challenge. So I would definitely say start either with a full-time person or somebody who is available a lot that has actually made a living growing fresh organic produce in your region. So just number one would be having a subject matter expert to support your operation if you're getting into the production side. The second thing that I would do is actually try to get your stakeholders on the same page as much as you can. So again, what I realized as we've been into this for 5 years is that there are a lot of partners that we didn't think about 5 years ago. And I wish we had all sat down and kind of shared our resources up front. So does anybody have a tractor with excess capacity? So you kind of identify the existing assets that are probably already there. In a lot of the cases that has the ability to be used for something like this, so that you don't have to go out and buy a new one. So bring your health folks together, your food service from your schools together, your natural resource program, if you have NRCS soil people that can tell you where your best land is, your best soils. So I think getting that team together up front to kind of talk about it and get some commonality in what you want to accomplish, I think would be important. And then the third would be to kind of maybe get that, if that team wants to put together kind of a strategic plan outline of what is it that you want to achieve with your production. So if it's more health oriented or job creation, or I'll tell you, it's hard to make a profit. So I don't know that I would jump into it hoping to make a lot of money, but certainly financial sustainability is important. But maybe get those key stakeholders to think through kind of what's the impact you want your program to make, and then back into what is it you should do to achieve that. So I think the strategic planning piece and kind of having everybody, the key stakeholders, on the same page would be helpful to you. And it would, I just think of all the different times where we didn't realize something else was happening that we could have leveraged or partnered with and not had to do it ourselves. So kind of having that conversation early on would be helpful too.
Thank you, John. Aaron, did you have any thoughts about how a tribe can get started on this path?
I think John's advice is solid, and I don't know that I would. I don't know. I want to add anything to that. I think that was pretty succinct.
What about a food sovereignty assessment? Because it seems like that was something that John mentioned right at the top. Seems like a logical starting place.
Yes, if that was back to me, I think that's a great way to do it. Again, so part of the question for that is, are you assessing? Well, one of the things you're going to want to figure out is, what are you assessing? So are you trying to assess the food system within your community? And if so, kind of thinking through early on what identifying the assets that I mentioned, and then also deciding, is it oriented towards feeding your community or creating a new kind of a enterprise. But the food sovereignty assessment is a great way to assess, kind of do some market research on your community, to build awareness in your community. Because if you go out and actually do surveys and collect data from your households or your food programs, that's going to raise awareness that you're trying to do something related to local ag or local food systems. So use that as a building awareness among folks. And then don't forget to include all your programs. So most tribes have lots of food subsidy programs, whether it's FDIPR or SNAP or WIC. Some of them have farmers market vouchers programs. There's if you have a tribal school system, there's the food service programs. You may have convenience stores, grocery stores. So usually there's if you can identify those up front, you're going to have a much more comprehensive study. And I think that'd be a great way to build awareness and kind of understand the environment that you're working in.
All right, thank you, John. We did have another question that came in. How did you prioritize your action plan? What did you get done in years 1, 3, and 5?
Years 1 and 2 were essentially building out the farm. So we started out wanting to build, to create 5, I call them mini farms, to kind of spread out the activities, and the locations, and that. So the first year or two was really building out the farm. I would say, looking back on it, I wish we had done nothing but build first, and then, because we tried to build and grow at the same time, and that is really, really hard. So it's kind of like trying to live in a house while you're building it. So if I would say, take the time up front to plan your farm, treat it like it is a construction project, where you need to know the drainage, you need to know where your irrigation lines are going, your electrical lines are going, where if you're putting in high tunnels, plan them out so that they're not shadowing another one. The sun is very important on the growing side. So actually treat the master planning as if you're building a building. Get through the construction phase if you can, and then start the growing. The years 3 and 4 were really capacity building. So we realized in those years that we did not have a lot of tribal members that were on board getting trained in organic vegetable production. So we did a kind of a formal outreach, and that was through the partnership with Kellogg and NCAT, where we said we really need to get tribal members on board and trained in organic vegetable production. So we have ramped up the local food ambassador program so that we have the capacity, internal capacity at Choctaw to feed this to run this operation for generations. So we're in the middle of that now. And where we are at this point, which we're in year 5, so it is, it's about expanding the scale. So we've got the farms kind of built out. It takes a while to get people to trust you to feed them. So we now have a good reputation. We've got good production standards. Once we get the GAPS food certification, that's kind of more proof that we are a good solid operation. So we're looking to expand our production and have the ability to sell more. So we're actually meeting with larger regional distributors that want a more, they're going to place a lot larger orders. So we're kind of in the growth phase right now.
All right, thank you, John. We had another question that came in. How much political buy-in did you get from your tribal government, and how did you get that level of organizational support, if you did get it?
When we first started, honestly, it was just, I didn't realize the scope and scale of this initiative. So I'm not a farmer. I certainly wasn't a farmer 5 years ago. So when we started, it just kind of felt like the casino needed some fresh produce. We could do that. We got a grant. So we certainly got support on the grant funding side, and we just kind of started the initiative. We didn't give a lot of thought to the political and the partnership side. But I wish that we had, because there's as I said a few minutes ago about that food sovereignty assessment, the more we got into it, the more we realized what our local food system looked like. So whether it's the commodity food program or the diabetes prevention program or the school system, there are a lot of things that are probably siloed around your reservation that are not working together that could be. So if you could start with some kind of a strategic plan, a food sovereignty assessment and a strategic planning exercise, and then if some of the council or chief or chairman could be maybe not involved on a day-to-day basis, but at least there at the final presentation or the kickoff, so that they understand how much impact the local food or the food system has on the tribe. And then the tribal government's role really is at the policy side. So any policies that they could do to encourage buying local foods would be helpful. So really the government's role a lot of times is the policy side. And so just kind of being able to inform them on how important that is and how impactful that could be. And so maybe if they could be involved in the planning side, the strategic planning side, and then any kind of a council resolution action kind of pursuing food sovereignty initiative, I think would be helpful if you can get it. Looking back on it, I wish we had done something more like that, a little more formal. I just didn't realize kind of how many different departments this cut across.
All right. Our next question is, do you integrate Choctaw traditional practices in your operation, planting ceremonies, wild harvesting, etc.?
On the fresh produce side, we have not done a lot of that. We do. We recently, there was a green corn festival that happened at our Head Start program a few weeks ago. So we partnered with them, and we had a lot of our staff there supporting that festival. at the Choctaw Indian Fair, which is an annual event here at Choctaw. It's the biggest event that we have to get the community together, and we set up our mobile market there, and we provide access to our produce and finished goods. But we have not done a lot of just the traditional ceremonies around the planting or the harvesting side. With our local food ambassador program, we actually are encouraging that. So we're trying to identify those traditions and see if we can bring any of those practices into any of our processes or activities. So there's definitely more to do on that side, and it's on our radar screen, and we hope to add to that every season.
All right, next question. Were there any new laws or changes to the tribal code that were needed to facilitate any of these activities? If so, how was that accomplished?
Were there any laws that were needed? Janie would probably say yes. Janie hit it. I'm not a lawyer, so I plead ignorance on it. We have been growing and supplying on reservation and off reservation since 2013. Janie and Aaron probably both have lots of reasons that we should be dealing with that differently. We just haven't done it. On the procurement and policy side, we have not had to make any changes. We have just been able to work with our programs to gain their support and trust to start buying from us. But certainly a local procurement policy would be helpful for sure, but we haven't had to do that.
Aaron, this one is definitely in your wheelhouse. Do you have a response to this one?
Well, I mean, obviously, John's already given you some details about their process. Just as your friendly lawyer on the call, I would say codifying some of this can definitely go a long way towards helping tribes really occupy this space of food sovereignty and express their goal to achieve that sovereignty in a very robust way. There's a lot of different ways that you could go about making changes to a tribal code that would further facilitate food sovereignty. I know I've talked to folks before about this idea of maybe changing your procurement policies in tribal code to make it clear that you want to source from tribally owned producers or tribally owned food businesses, tribal producers, so that you're giving kind of the first go there to local folks and really helping stand up and that kind of economic development on reservation. I think that's just one example. This could go in a lot of different ways. And we would be here all day if I went into all the different ways, but I think that's a good short answer.
All right, thank you, Aaron. We did have another question that came in. Are you planning on any year-round growing?
Yes, we already do year-round growing. So well, I say that we actually, it's too hot in our climate in August and September to produce. So we grow 10 months out of the year. We have to shut down in August and September. But we are, and the opportunity in August and September is if we could actually cool our greenhouse, we could grow our transplants sooner and have more crops in the ground ready October the 1st. So we grow 10 months out of the year except August and September. To fill that gap, we're planning to have a cooled greenhouse to grow seeds to transplants August and September, and then get a quicker harvest going in the fall.
All right, next question is, and you touched on this in your presentation, what is the cost to feed the entire tribe for 1 year? And do you have the capacity, and what outside resources would be needed to feed the Choctaw, to feed the tribe for 1 year?
Yeah. I don't know the answer to that. All we did, all we assessed was what would it take to grow, or how much produce and livestock would we have to produce in order to meet the demand. I don't know what the dollar figure associated with that is. The challenge you would run into if you tried to do it all is just changing people's habits and customs to more seasonal nature. So especially if you've got climates and seasons, there's just certain items that produce through the year and certain items that don't. And certain times, if you're doing any kind of subsistence or hunting or anything like that, there's certain times of the year that you can do that. Certain times you can fish, and certain times you can that are better for harvesting livestock. So it would really just be a change in most people's customs and habits, just to adapt to not being able to get everything they want whenever they want it. So that's the practical reality of trying to produce it all on your community. And again, we have not gotten into any of the processing or preservation side, so you would have to probably add things like that to get you through some of the other seasons. But I don't know the cost to do it, and it would certainly change a change in habits and lifestyles for almost everybody to adapt to that.
All right, and it looks like this might be our last one. Have you reestablished traditional indigenous foods within your farms?
I don't believe we have. I'm trying to think through any of the seeds that we're now growing organically. So we have not established a seed library, which some communities have. I know that I've been in contact with the Choctaw Nation in Oklahoma, and they have found some traditional seed items. So as of this point, we have not. We have built out the farms. We have become certified organic, which would certainly be a good complement to those types of items. And frankly, we've just been so focused on getting everything built out and getting our staff trained and being financially sustainable that we have not done things like that. So at this point, the answer is no.
All right, thank you, John. That's our last question. Erin, if you want to close us out.
Absolutely. Thank you again, John, for taking the time to share your work with us. I think this is just, as Brian said, a really dynamic model. And I know we had some great questions. So I know everybody who was on today learned a lot, and anybody who watches this in the future will learn a lot from your incredible work. So thank you so much for being with us today. And really, there's so much good work being done across Indian country and across the nation right now in food systems work, and we have done a couple of different reports that kind of lift up some of that work. You can read about some of those stories in either of these reports. The one on the right here is Intertribal Food Systems. That's the report that we've been referencing today that our team put together, and that one focuses solely on work that's being done in Indian country. The report on the left was done by Wallace Center at Winrock International, and that focuses on some nationwide community food systems innovative work. Both of those reports and more information about the programs included in them can be found at this website, which is right here, which the W.K. Kellogg Foundation recently rolled out in support of both of those reports. And that web address, again, is right here on the screen. It's www.communityfood.wkkf.org. We'll be continuing to lift up programs from our report, the Intertribal Food Systems report, in this Tribal Food Innovations webinar series. And we'll have details on further webinars in this series posted on our website, which is www.indigenousfoodandag.com. Or you can log on there and subscribe to our email list, and we can keep you updated that way. I just want to thank you all again for being with us and spending part of your Friday afternoon with us. And thank John Hendrix once again, our guest speaker, for sharing all of his fantastic work with Choctaw Fresh Produce. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you. That'll conclude today's webinar. We appreciate everyone for attending, and we'll see you next time.